Joining me now is Tennessee Congressman Chuck Fleischmann. Congressman, in regards to the automotive industry, Tennessee is literally the engine of the Southeast. Transportation equipment is your top export. How are these tariffs, or the back-and-forth tariffs, how will they impact businesses like Volkswagen and General Motors with major plants in your state?
Well, thank you. Good morning. Obviously, this tariff situation is concerning to a number of manufacturers in Tennessee. It's also concerning to our agricultural sector as well. This is going to be something that there's been a huge trade imbalance for quite some time. What's been going on in the past in terms of our trade deficit is not working. Having said that, Tennessee, my home state, has long been a beneficiary of free trade. So we're going to have to wait and see. Obviously, we have to take each country on a country-by-country basis. The EU is different from China. China is different from Canada. Canada is different from Mexico. But right now, the focus is on China. And I will say this, we have got to protect American intellectual property. That is key, and that's not happening.
Congressman Steve Forbes here. Do you think in terms of trade abuses, there are better ways to do it than putting the equivalent of sales taxes on the American people, American businesses, American consumers? Is that the best weapon?
Steve, thank you for saying that. There are a lot of different tools in our arsenal with trade, and trade is very important. As you know, Steve, trade can be something that can be used for diplomatic purposes. Trade can be used for a lot of different things. The tariff is a very effective weapon, but what happens sometimes is when you launch that weapon, you get a retaliation back, and that creates what we would commonly call a trade war, which usually does not benefit anyone. Steve, I would say this. In an ideal world, we would have open trade everywhere in the world. China has really cheated over the years. They've not been very fair. There's a huge trade imbalance. I would prefer to see other tools other than this, but I do trust the president. I will say this, even though I'm a free trader, President Trump knows what he's doing. He's a good negotiator, and what I think will happen, Steve, is ultimately this is a process that will play out over time. This is a negotiation process. We probably have one of the best negotiators in the world in Donald Trump.
Christina?
So I just have a quick question. I want to bring back to your state. Have you heard anything from these bourbon and whiskey companies in regards to investments or laying off employees? Do you have any insight into that?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I think you're alluding to the tariffs that Mexico put, I believe, a 25% tariff on domestic whiskey, Tennessee whiskey, I believe Kentucky whiskey. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that's a source of concern. What that does basically is it makes our whiskey more expensive in those countries, and it's basically a trade barrier. So there are concerns there. There's concerns in the agricultural sector. But the largest amount of concerns we've heard really have been from manufacturers who've seen the price of steel go up, the price of aluminum go up. But I would say this is a process that's going to have to play itself out, and we just have to be very careful, and I would say monitor the process very carefully. We're going to have to look and see how the markets react. We're going to have to see how consumers react. So this is the beginning of, I think, a long process.
Congressman, if I am running a business that is going to get hurt by the tariffs that have already been thrown on, say, my exports to China, I'm calling your office hot mad, yelling at you or yelling at whoever answers the phone, and you're up for re-election in November. Are you worried?
Well, we have heard from our constituents. First of all, our manufacturers and our citizens in Tennessee are very pleased. We've cut taxes, especially corporate taxes, which was so critically important. We've made sure that we've reduced regulations. Unemployment is at an all-time low. The basics are very good. So, for example, my re-election prospects are excellent because I have voted to do those things, and I've worked with this administration. Obviously, there's a concern on this trade issue. Tariffs are a part of it, but there are other parts of that. Mm-hmm. We've heard from our constituents who are very concerned about the protection of their intellectual property rights. China continues to cheat in that realm. They view the president as a hero in this regard in trying to combat that. So this is a process. We're not going to agree on all the issues, but yes, we're hearing from them. We're hearing from our farmers. But ultimately, I think we need to move towards free trade. And in that process, we just have to watch how these tariffs work and keep them as narrow as we can.
Congressman Steve Forbes, would you support the president making a major free trade initiative, starting negotiations with the EU or even Britain or Japan to get a real free trade agreement process going so we don't do these tit-for-tat equivalent of sales taxes, but get something comprehensive going so we can remove these barriers? Should the president take a big initiative on that, or is it just a matter of timing before he does it?
Steve, that's another great question. If you recall, originally President Trump opposed the TPP. Now he has said that he's actually opening to looking at that, and I think that shows a great flexibility on his part and on the administration's part to look at trade in a region-by-region manner. So I think that's a very good step in the right direction. Just the other day, he said he was going to hold off on NAFTA until after the elections. Obviously, the Canadian situation poses different and unique challenges. So he's looking at this as a business person, and I know you're a great business person. I remember when you ran on the flat tax many years ago. I remember that fondly. But be that as it may, still pushing it. I understand. It's simple and it's flat. Well done.
By the way, I've still got that book, Congressman, the first book that Steve ever wrote. It's in my office, and I crack it open every now and then to get some religion. Lindsay Bell has a question for you, Congressman.
Yeah, just
yes, go right ahead.
You know, your state is being severely impacted by, could be severely impacted by these trade tariffs, and with regards to that, you have received significant benefits from the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. When does that start to really get hit? When does unemployment start creeping up? When do businesses start making business decisions and cutting costs to offset some of these tariff increases and start cutting jobs?
Well, the great thing about the free enterprise system and businesses in general, business people react to situations, and they react in a very smart way. So Tennessee has long done well because we're a state with no state income tax on wages. We're a state that's a right-to-work state. We've got the basics here, and that's one of the reasons why companies chose to come here. We had the added benefit then when what I did with the president is reduce corporate taxes, reduce regulations. That's why we're seeing not only Tennessee's economy booming, but really our American economy booming. So as to when there is a reaction to this, I think they will watch their bottom lines. They'll watch their sales figures. They will look at the different indicators that are out there, and they will react. I much prefer the way that the free enterprise system reacts to adversity than the way that the government reacts to adversity. The way government reacts is they borrow and spend more. The private enterprise system will look at this. I think America will move ahead. Trade is one part of an overall problem, and this is where I credit the president. We're looking at regulations, we're looking at taxes, we're looking at trade. We have to look at the deficit at some point in time.
Yeah, we keep hearing that, Congressman. And so far, we're waiting. Medicare Hospital Trust Fund goes bankrupt and or runs out of money in 8 years. So there you go. Congressman Chuck Fleischmann, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.